and welcome to episode 1 of the Surrender Outdoors podcast. I am Chris Gerlach and your host, Michael Harrell, and we're here bringing you something that we've waited for a long time. It's been in the works. We've tried to get things laid out, and we're finally to the point that we're ready to push forward with it, and that is bringing you guys an audio and video podcast. Our community has been consistently growing over the last few years, and we wanted to maybe come with another avenue for you guys to listen and see what's going on with Surrender Outdoors, and as we grow and as we do new things to keep you guys updated. So specifically today, as we're launching the podcast, we wanted to take a few minutes, step back, and for those of you who are new to the community, give you an idea of who we are and where we came from, and where we're going over the next few years, and give you kind of a vision casting for all of the exciting things that we have coming up in Surrender Outdoors over the next season and over the next few years. So I'll go ahead and start. For those of you who don't know, Michael Harrell, the host, has been working in the outdoor industry for the better part of a decade. But since 2012, most notably, he's been producing his own TV and web show called Surrender Outdoors, where him and his staff, they video and produce what they're doing in the outdoors, whether it be hunting or fishing, preparing for the season, that kind of thing, put out episodes, and they use that as a ministry to take the gospel to people who may or may not know what the gospel is. So what we're going to do today is kind of take a step back and see, for those of you who may not know, how he got started in the outdoor industry, because it's kind of an interesting story.
Yeah, it is. Today we won't really go into my past and kind of how I grew up, but we'll talk about kind of how Surrender Outdoors started. It all started, let's see, Mason is he 23 now or 24?
He's 20. He'll turn 24.
Yeah, so when Mason was around 2 years old, that's when kind of the beginning for the outdoor industry started for me, because I had an event happen in my life that just completely changed my life, and of course rocked my world. And
you were a pretty heavy fisherman.
Yeah, I had a dream and a goal of maybe not being a professional fisherman, but to the point where I was at least fishing all the amateur divisions and things like that. Back then it was a dream to be a professional fisherman, but I just didn't have the financing or backing, and didn't even know how to go about doing it. I was fishing local tournaments with buddies and little club tournaments, things like that, hopping all around southeastern Oklahoma, and had an event happen at Lake Durant one day. So this is actually more of my testimony than anything, of how I come to know the Lord. We had moved to Lake Durant. Lake Durant was a new lake, a city lake that was stocked with Florida strain bass, and it wasn't open to the public yet. So I had some special access to start fishing that lake since I lived on it, and catching some quality fish out of it. And then the following year they opened it to the public, and looking back on it, I'm glad that they did, because had it still been closed to the public, what I'm fixing to tell you about would have probably ended up a lot differently. But it basically started. Are we getting Mason's background music in there?
Text him.
Okay. Yeah, my son is in his room, and he's got the TV pretty loud for some reason. But anyways, so I had been catching these fish. I'd been on a streak for about 3 or 4 days catching these fish. It was in March, so that would have been, let's see, Mason's born in 97, so that would have been around 99 or the year 2000. I don't remember the exact year. And
so this is longer ago than I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought this was like 2008 or something like that.
No, Mason was, he was either 2 or 3. I don't remember the date, but basically I'm catching these fish on a swim and jig pattern in coontail grass. I'd catch a front, north wind would blow and pound the south bank, and and so I'd go over there in my little 15-foot boat. I had a 15-foot boat. Can't even remember what brand it was. I just remember it had a 70 horse Evinrude on it, and I would flip that grass and swim that jig through there and let it sink and then pop it real hard. And I mean, I was just wearing a 5 and 6 pound bass out. So I was doing that for about 3 days in a row, and so we get another front. You know how the wind blows here in Oklahoma in March. It really blows. Mm-hmm. And we get another front out of the north. So I head over there, and I am backing my boat down. The wind is just, I mean, it's 315 acre impoundment, and the wind is just rocking, man. It's like 30 miles an hour out of the north, and the little lake is white capping. So for it to white cap, you know the wind's blowing pretty good.
Yeah. Especially Lake Durant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I backed my boat down. At that time, they didn't have a dock or anything. You know, it was just a ramp. And I do what most fishermen do. That I pull the boat up on the bank and I drop the trolling motor to hold it instead of tying it off. Well, the front of my boat is facing the north, the direction the wind's coming from, and I jump in my truck and pull it up there, and I look back in my side mirror and I see that my boat has drifted off the bank just a little bit, 5 yards maybe. So I pull my emergency brake and I take off running. Well, when I get down there, it's about 20 yards off the bank, maybe 25, and it's just starting to hit where the wind's blowing good. So my only option is to jump in after it. So, I'm standing there and I'm looking across at the bank, and there's Lake Durant. You can see a lot of timber back then. Now it's, the timber's still there, but it's underwater. And all I could think about is my boat getting over there and getting on those rocks or getting against that timber and it tearing it up. So I begin to strip down, and I take off everything but my wedding ring and my underwear. I'm in heavy gear, and because it's cold, and I jump in and start swimming after the boat. And the more I swim, or the further the boat gets out, and the further I swim out, the faster the wind begins to push it. And we're out there. This goes on 2 or 3 times. I'm putting my head down. I'm dogging. Swimming as hard as I can, and I would be just within an arm's reach. And I don't have my wedding ring on today. It's put up right now, but I was a lot skinnier then. And, I was probably 195 pounds instead of 250.
It's crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is. And so I would swim, and my wedding ring would try to come off. So I'd grip my hand. So I'm basically swimming with one hand closed. Well, so my left hand is like this. My right hand would come over. My underwear was coming down. So I don't know what I was worried about there. Why I even worried about the underwear? But I just remember a couple times pulling them back up, and I'd swim again. And I got out there about 200 yards off the bank. And, I mean, the water's around 52 degrees. I knew what it was from the day before, so it's really, really cold. And with the wind and the wind chill, I'm not a doctor or a physician, but what I would like to think's happened is I tired out and hypothermia started to set in. I mean, I just remember my body locking up, and I could not swim anymore. I mean, I was just physically exhausted, and just I remember stopping, and I remember going under the water and looking up and seeing a tunnel, and at that instant, my life began to flash before my eyes. I don't know if you guys ever had a near-death experience, but I'm having that experience, and I can see a white tunnel, but I can see my son being born. I can see my wife on our wedding day. I had a vision of me scoring a touchdown in high school football. I don't know why. It's kind of just some weird stuff, but. I remember just praying, just asking God. My prayer was, "Save me, Lord, and I'll change so I can see my son again, and I'll change and live my life for you." And I remember going under. Also, one of the things I want to add is I knew how deep of water I was in because I knew the lake so well. I was in 32 foot of water, and I pictured a hook dragging my body and somebody telling my wife that they found me, which is just really weird because all that happened in a millisecond. And I remember in college in lifeguard training, they said, get on your back. Can't tell you how far under the surface. I was maybe a foot under the surface or so. And I remember just doing this, just pushing with both hands straight down beside my body and just feeling a lift. To this day, I can't tell you what the lift was. It's godly. I don't want to get into all that because I don't know. I guess when I get to heaven, that's one of the things I'm going to ask him. Did two angels grab me or did, because I physically didn't have the strength to do it. And the reason why I told you earlier that it was fortunate that Lake Durant was now open to the public, because a 16-year-old and 13-year-old kid that was skipping school that day had bought my truck. The 16-year-old, their parents bought my truck the week before, so they were out at the house. We lived right there at the entrance gate to the lake, and he saw there was a lake. So thank God that he bought my truck, and thank God that he skipped school. Although, kids, if you're listening to this, don't skip school to go look at a lake. You might do it to go hunting or fishing, but not to just go view. But thank God that they did that day. And they said when they saw me, they said they heard an audible noise when they pulled down there, and they saw my truck with the truck door open and everything. And they looked out and saw me, and they said I was laid out on my back like a crucifix and just my feet. All that was going was my feet. And I don't remember the trip back, the 200 plus yards back to land. I do remember at some point somebody grabbing me by my arms. I felt a pull on each side, and they pulled me up on the bank. And I don't remember really what happened after that until I was talking to Mike, the game warden, again, and he was telling me, I was laying there on my side, and he's telling me, hey, we're going to get your boat. Everything's all right. Your boat's fine. My boat had just blowed up against those trees and just kind of got locked in place. Nothing happened to it. But from that point forward, I that's really how my relationship with the Lord started. And I just really got on fire for God after that. And, I went to a backyard Bible club when I was growing up in Dallas. And, I never was a bad kid, grew up with grandparents that prayed and a mom that prayed, audible, but I just didn't know the Lord or what it was like to live for the Lord. So, we rocked on there for about a year or so, started going to church and just didn't go consistently. But this is part of my testimony that you may have never heard. It took me a while to realize that I had made God a promise, and things kept happening in my life to remind me of that. And one of the things that I got really interested in, I completely stopped fishing. I didn't want to have anything to do with fishing at all. In fact, I sold my boat. I didn't fish for 7 years. I didn't get on a boat for 7 years after that. And but my other passion was hunting. It just wasn't nearly as strong. It was just something that I did during hunting season. Mm-hmm. I went and I bow hunted some, and I had a few kills under my belt, and it was something that I liked to do. But deer hunting for me then was just more about going camping and hanging out, and get up and go. If you kill a deer, you killed one. If you didn't, you just
right.
You camped for the week. We closed down our schools here in Oklahoma the week of Thanksgiving for rifle season. Mm-hmm. And so that was just kind of a traditional thing. And so I started getting these invites from different friends to come to church, to come visit their church. And David Arnold, Steve Roberts, and Max Heim, all within a few day period, invited me to come to their church. And Max Heim, one of my buddies from high school, actually bought me a Bible and put a note in there. I still have that note in the Bible to this day that says, I know you enjoy watching Adventure Bound Outdoors, and I thought you would enjoy this. And Adventure Bound Outdoors was a faith-based outdoor show. And there was one other one that I watched, Buck Ventures Outdoors. and two faith-based shows that I really like to watch because they always had a message. It wasn't just hunting; it was always giving God the glory for what they did, and I wanted to be a part of something like that, do something like that, and so I started hunting more, and like I said, just really got on fire for God, and got involved with a ministry called Fourth Tuesdays at First Baptist Church of Durant. A bunch of us guys would get together and cook wild game, and shoot guns or shoot our bows or fish or whatever. And then we started this thing called a beast feast, a wild game dinner. And so I got really involved with that and wanting to help with that, and the beast feast really grew. So it started leading me into ministry, and the way that I got started in the outdoor industry. So I'm developing my hunting skills, learning as much as I can about hunting. Kind of hunting's taking the place of fishing, and I drew out for McAllister. We have a draw hunt every year there, and it's recurve or longbow only.
Right.
It's all traditional, and I'm on. I want to say, this shows my age. I think it was called MySpace, and I don't know if there was one before that. But I met this guy named Irvy Orton from.
Irvy Orton.
Yep, from up around. I'm trying to remember the little town he lived in, but he's north of Muskogee. And so we meet online. I get drew out for this hunt, so I'm trying to find somebody that I want to stay with, to save on money. They rent campers and cabins and stuff like that. So get to talking to Irvy, meet him online, and so we meet at McAllister at this hunt, and I'm visiting with him and telling him my testimony and what's went on. And I'm telling him, man, there's this show I really like called Buck Ventures Outdoors. I said, and they got this call. I said, it's called an easy wheeze. I said, I heard that a year ago. I got a 156 hanging over my head right here on the wall. That was my first big deer, and that's what started my big deer passion. Well, I had a little 6-point come in and had my muzzle loader on him. And I'm just waiting on him to step out from behind the pine tree, and I'm going to shoot this 6-point. I didn't really care about trophy hunting. I just was learning, and I just wanted to kill bucks. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about mature bucks. The big thing back then was kill your buck, and then you can be the camp cook for the rest of the week and cook and eat and sleep in and all that kind of stuff. But I hear this, and man, I whip my head up, and there is a giant 60 yards coming down this mountain, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm shooting him. And he comes right to the spot, poses up where the 6-point is, runs him off, and I shoot this deer, and he just drops behind a pine tree. And I was about 30 foot high because, I'm hunting on the side of a mountain, or what we call mountains here in Oklahoma, and it's ridges. So where he snort wheezed from, he was level with me. So I had to get so high in that climber. When I shot that deer, he just folded, and he fell behind a big pine tree, and I couldn't see him. I could just see feet sticking out. I knew it was a big deer. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. So, man, I come down that thing in that climbing stand like I was on a fireman on a fire pole. I think I slid down the whole tree, 30 feet, and I jumped out of that thing and walked over there, and I was just like, oh, my Lord, and I was like, that was the coolest sound that I'd ever heard. I never heard a deer do that and vocalize like that. And I remember going back to deer camp and trying to tell my father-in-law and uncles and stuff the noise that this deer made, and the noise I would do sounded more like a fart, and it's like he was grunting. I was like, no, it's just one of those deals. I didn't know how to mimic it, and then started learning how to mimic it. And so anyways, back to Irvy. So I'm telling Irvy about this easy wheeze call, and he's like, you're not going to believe this. I know the guys that invented that. It's Jeff Danker and Dan Evans. He said, I used to coach them in basketball. And I was like, no way, are you serious? He's like, yeah, I can introduce you to them. And I was like, man, I would love to be a part of their show. I saw or a part of their ministry, I saw where they were having these applications online. And so Irving makes some connections with Dan, and I send in a portfolio, and I sent in pictures, and I wrote stories about every hunt. I mean, I went top notch. You know, I got this binder, and I put these pictures in it, and I wrote a little story, and the wind's getting up outside. Who knows? Some decorations, some Easter decorations probably. But anyways, Jeff Danker calls me, and he says, "Man, I was reading over your bio, and I love the way that you story told. You told a story about everything." And he said, "I want to give you an opportunity." And at that time, there was a fee. I don't remember the gist of all of it. And he's like, "We're going to waive that for you. If you can get a camera, we want you to start filming your hunts." So that's how I got started in the outdoor industry, is filming with Buck Ventures, and then that Buck Ventures was growing and adding pro staff, and I had another opportunity to do some stuff with Final Descent Outdoors. Buck Ventures back then was just mainly, whitetail and Final Descent. I went to church with Brad Clay at Silo, and I had actually bought one of our lab pups, and so those two guys, Buck Ventures, Jeff Danker, and Final Descent, Brad Clay opened the door for me to be able to get into the outdoor industry. And it was just a few years. It was more than a few years. I'd been into it now for about 8 years or so, and we want to go into the big boy story now, and kind of how this all transitioned into.
Let's. So I definitely want to talk about it eventually. We're getting close on time. Maybe we can hit the highlights of it right now, and then whenever we go back. So for you guys to know, there's so much to Mike's story that we really want to get into, and that we really want to talk about, because we feel like it can bring value to so many people. But the story is so expansive from the time that he was young until all the way up to now, that we're actually going to do another podcast. We're going to do a long form podcast where we go deep into detail about kind of every aspect of the story. But I think maybe for right now, we can maybe hit the highlights about Big Boy, and then kind of move on to where where we are now.
I said 7 or 8 years. I know exactly how long it was. It was about 10 years into it, 9 to 10 years actually. This monster deer walks into my life, and me and a buddy finds his sheds on a lease, and that he was on. So I can't get on that lease, but we're able to obtain a lease, that borders it. And the first camera we put out, that next season we get pictures of him. And that just starts an absolute obsession to even making this deer an idol. This deer is so big. He's a new possible state record. And kind of how my relationship with the Lord, I guess, backslides is the best way to describe it. So we'll tell that story in a future podcast, and maybe you can throw up a picture of Big Boy on here, so that they kind of know the gist of just how big this deer was.
Because it's a crazy story, and this is a massive buck. And there was, I know I've gotten obsessed over hunts and stuff before on much smaller deer, and then you see something like Big Boy, and I can't imagine. But like Mike said, he got absolutely obsessed over this buck to the point that it wasn't healthy, and then had to go through the process of walking out of that, and then
just leave it at this: the Lord will do big things when you let Him.
It's true. That's true. Because we so many times we focus on things that we think are important in the moment, but in the long run, they're minuscule. So
yeah.
But somewhere down the line, you decide that you're going to, of course, like you said, you were involved with a couple of different shows, but somewhere along the line, you decided that you were going to start your own ministry.
Yeah. That was all took place after the Big Boy chase. Some things happened in my life and in my son's life, and the Lord convicted me of it, and And I turned that all over to him, and he started to really lay on my heart that I need to share these stories with people. And I had no desire to go speak in public, to share my testimony. As a Christian, you think we would want that, but I've never been a guy to stand up or to speak out publicly. Or I still remember when I got my camera, I called Jeff 2 weeks in, and I was like, dude, I gotta quit. I can't do this. I couldn't even look at the camera. I couldn't even look at the lens and talk to it. And Jeff was like, just stick with it, man. Just take the camera out and go out and just talk to it. He goes, it's not nothing you got to send us. He said, you don't even have to press record. Just go talk to the camera and
repetitions.
Yeah. So now it's led to me being able to speak at large events, wild game dinners, and there's nobody that I won't share my testimony with if I'm given the opportunity. If they'll give me 15 or 20 minutes, I know I have some things that the Lord needs to use me to speak to them. So.
Yep. And over the last few years, I know even since I met you, and I guess it was 2014 or 2015, which it's crazy to think that at that point Surrender was only a couple years old,
right.
And now here we are in 2021. You're about to hit your 10-year anniversary. It's
right.
crazy to think about.
It is.
But no, you guys have steadily grown, and the basis of the message stays the same. Christ is number one, and that's what we try to make a point in every show that we put out.
Yeah.
Even then, like the stories though progress. Last year we went after the Grand Slam. You never hit the Grand Slam.
Didn't happen. No.
And through a series of unfortunate events, it was a crazy hunt, but we come back and it ended up just not happening. Is another one of those scenarios where it's like, you have your eyes set on something and know it's a cool goal to have. At the end of the day, it's just not as important as what you think it is.
Right.
But that's in the past, and we're pushing forward into this season, and we're really excited for what's about to happen. And I think we've actually got some really exciting things on the docket for this next year in Surrender.
Yeah, we do. For one, we're going after the Grand Slam again.
Yep.
That starts in 2 weeks in Florida, and we're going to go chase the Osceola first.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And by the way, because there are several different Grand Slams, so to speak, specifically what we're talking about is the North American Turkey Grand Slam.
Turkey Grand Slam. Yep, it's the Osceola, which is the hardest, most expensive to get. I'm fortunate to have met some guys through our title sponsor, One and Done Pro, and Jeff Christie, and we've met some awesome brothers down there in Florida that's just letting us come and hunt, man. They just opened up their camp and they want to be a part of Surrender. And Avery Duvall is he's over the Whitetail Sportsman's Foundation, which actually what they do is they raise funds for disabled hunters and take them hunting. So we're excited about being a part of that organization. So we're going to go chase our Osceola. Then we'll come back to Oklahoma, where I have properties that I lease where I can get my Eastern in Rio again. And then we're going to try to head to Nebraska. We just got that sewed up. We'll be hunting with Conyers Outdoors up there in Nebraska to get our Merriam. Mm-hmm. So hopefully this year it'll happen, and if it don't, it don't. But it's
we're excited. We got some things solidified too this year that we didn't. Even what was it? You guys were hunting your Osceola in Florida, and you guys were even at that point. If you go back and watch the episode from season 6, they weren't even sure if they were going to be able to make it back home because that's when COVID hit really heavy, and they were closing down borders.
Right.
And then, we went to Colorado. If you watched that episode, and that was on a whim. Because their hunt in, where was it, Kentucky? Or what was it?
Nebraska.
Nebraska got canceled because of COVID. So we started calling outfitters and on a 2-day notice took off to Colorado. So this year, and that was really late season. So this year, a lot of things have kind of evened out, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So we're really excited about that.
It's planned.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You and I kind of have our bearings a little bit better as far as producing and editing and stuff like that, because I I had just started doing some editing for you at that point in Colorado, and we were really we weren't in sync necessarily on everything. So we've got some things lined out there. So really exciting. We're also super excited about the podcast. This is something that we're trying to put out pretty consistently now, so that episodes are great because you have 13 episodes spanning the season, but there's so many people who just don't get to see the day in and day outs, and this gives us an avenue to kind of talk about that and give people detail to stories that they didn't get to see in the episode, because in an episode, realistically, you only have about 20 minutes worth of footage.
Yeah,
you usually have multiple hunts.
Yeah, so you just see the finished product.
Yeah.
And here we're able to at least talk about the work and the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it, and the backbone of it. The finished product is nice, but and it could be a learning experience for another hunter out there that wants to do something like this. So.
Yep. So for those of you who are curious, which if you're listening to the podcast, then I would assume you are, we're going to start. I can't tell you exactly how often we're planning on putting out podcasts, but I know that we're going to do everything we can to put those on some of the most common platforms. For sure, YouTube. We're going to put them on Facebook and Instagram, and then the audio versions of those, we're going to push to get those on Spotify and an Apple podcast here pretty soon. If you guys have anything specific that you want to hear, anything you want to hear us talk about, because we plan on doing a lot of storytelling. We also plan on doing some tips, tricks, and tactics. Take advantage of the experience that Michael's gained over the years for hunting these big bucks. Hit us up on Instagram or Facebook. Send us a private message if you have ideas for things that you want to hear about, or if you have stories that you want to hear about. If you have a favorite episode that you want to hear us talk about, let us know. And we want to... at the end of the day, you guys are our community, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without you. So we want to provide you guys value. We want to stay in touch with you. So I think that's what we have for today's podcast. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Next on the docket, I think we're going to try and sit down and do a podcast with our title sponsor, Jeff Christie, who owns One and Done Pro. Fantastic game feeders and different hunting accessories and things of that nature. So we don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, and knowing Jeff, it could be totally wild. So
he's a raging Cajun. So.
He's a raging Cajun, straight out of
a lot of fun,
straight out of Louisiana. So if nothing else, you may just hit up that podcast and listen to it just for the wild factor. So
we don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah, but all right. Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we'll see you next time on the Surrender Outdoors podcast.
Thank you, guys.